Over the past couple weeks, I've covered multiple Senate and governor's races around the country. I've talked about poll numbers, I've talked about the trend of independents breaking hard to the right, and about issues that are important to likely voters, especially those independent voters. I've talked at length about races in Washington State, Nevada, Georgia, and Texas. And while I've made references to some other states and some other races and other candidates of interest in passing, I haven't really focused any time on the Senate race in Pennsylvania. There's a reason for that. The reason is that I'm really not a fan of either candidate in that race. Look, I think it's obvious to any reasonable, rational human being that John Fetterman is the worst Democratic Senate candidate running for election in this cycle. Let's be honest, the guy comes across like he's 5 lost brain cells away from being a talking chimp. I think the only reason that Fetterman isn't 15 points down in the polls is because Dr. Oz is a terrible candidate too. I tell you, I do not envy the people of Pennsylvania right now because this election is eerily reminiscent of another vote between lousy candidates just a few years ago.
Welcome to the cable access televised debate between a giant douche and a turd sandwich.
Welcome to Political Pop Culture, where the important and the not-so-important issues of the day are broken down, discussed, and occasionally even mocked and ridiculed. I am your host, JP. This is my take. Lately, it seems like everybody is talking about John Fetterman. I understand that there are people who like the guy, but if I'm being brutally honest, I don't understand why. I think if you took actual John Fetterman quotes, things that he has said on video, things that he has posted on his Twitter feed, I think if you took those quotes and showed them to people outside the state of Pennsylvania, people who have never heard of John Fetterman, and you asked them to base an opinion of a candidate based solely on those quotes, I think any sane, rational human being would say that that person, the person who made those quotes, the person who said those things, has no business being in the United States Senate. Hey, there's a lot to criticize about Dr. Oz too, but I tell you what, Oz has never advocated for the release of convicted murderers from prison. Fetterman has, multiple times. In fact, the GOP just released an ad attacking Fetterman on his history of releasing violent criminals from prison. It's a really good look at some pretty unsavory characters that Fetterman has voted to release while acting as the chair of the Pennsylvania Board of Pardons.
He murdered a man by stabbing him with garden shears 26 times in a parking garage in Pittsburgh. Then, he tried to hire a hitman to murder his accomplice. As chair of the Pennsylvania Board of Pardons, John Fetterman voted to set him free.
This is a legit story. You can look it up for yourself, but here's the condensed version. Charles Goldblum was sentenced to life in prison for killing a man with garden shears in a parking garage in Pittsburgh. Goldblum stabbed his victim 26 times, and then he tried to hire a hitman to kill his accomplice in the murder. As Lieutenant Governor of Pennsylvania, John Fetterman voted to set Goldblum free in 2019, and afterwards, Fetterman said he was, quote, happy when the killer was released from prison.
He reportedly murdered the mother of his girlfriend with a pair of scissors, leaving them lodged in her chest. Against the pleas of the victim's family and the local DA, Fetterman voted to set him free. John
Brookins was convicted of first-degree murder for killing a 58-year-old woman with a pair of scissors. Not manslaughter, not second-degree murder. First-degree, premeditated murder. John Fetterman admitted he didn't know if Brookins was innocent or not, but he voted to release him anyway, and you're not going to believe why. Because Brookins does yoga. What?
News reports show he shot and killed a teenager in cold blood for money to buy heroin. Against the concerns of the victim's family, John Fetterman voted to set him free.
Wayne Covington was sentenced to life in prison for shooting and killing 18-year-old George Rudnicki. In June of 2021, John Fetterman was the only member of the Pennsylvania State Board of Pardons to vote to commute Covington's sentence. Covington admitted to shooting his victim to death while high, trying to steal money to buy more drugs.
As crime rages, John Fetterman wants to take his radical voting record to the Senate. Pennsylvania can't afford Fetterman.
These are only 3 examples of the types of criminals that John Fetterman sympathizes with. Now, I can't say that I sympathize with criminals, but I do sympathize with the like button. It really needs some attention. Okay, seriously though, if you like the video, do me a favor, hit the like button, and while you're at it, click on subscribe and hit the notification bell too. That way, you'll be the first to know anytime we release new content just like this. You'll also be helping the channel by telling the algorithm to show this video to other people who might be interested. Every little bit really does help, so thank you. John Fetterman has said that his reason for running for lieutenant governor was solely to lead the Board of Pardons, and he's spoken out in favor of ending life sentences for people convicted of second-degree murder. This guy literally wants to release murderers from prison. That's why he wanted to be lieutenant governor, so he could do just that, and he did. Before I started working on this story, I thought John Fetterman was a lousy candidate. I thought he was a trust fund brat who had little real-world experience. A guy who dresses like a bum and talks like a moron because he thinks it makes him relatable. But in researching this story, I gotta tell you, I've changed my mind. I don't think John Fetterman is a lousy candidate. I think he's a monster. And I think he's dangerous. I think his record of voting to release convicted murderers into society speaks for itself. And I think his calls to release those convicted of second-degree murder from prisons is reprehensible. I'm not saying I think people who commit heinous acts are irredeemable. That's between those convicted and their God. But I am saying that releasing convicted murderers from prison, putting the lives of innocent people at risk, is one of the most disgusting things I've ever seen a politician do. Don't let the stupid outfits and the stumbling speeches fool you. John Fetterman may be crazy, but he's crazy like a fox, and he is far more dangerous than people realize. Do a little bit of digging, see for yourself. And that's my take. What's your take? You can let me know your take in the comments below. You can also let me know your take by joining the cult at PolPopCult on all major social media outlets. Thank you for listening.